Hey everyone, I hope y'all are having a great day, and today I'll be reviewing The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I feel like all of Victoria Schwab's books end up making a pretty significant splash on the book internet, but this one, I feel like in particular, I saw everywhere. It got a lot of hype. I just checked its Goodreads rating like 2 seconds ago. It's like a 4.36, which is really good. It has over 100,000 ratings. It's a popular book. And honestly, the reason I picked it up is because I saw a TikTok about it. I somehow stumbled upon book TikTok, or book talk as the cool kids say, and this girl was giving this book as a book recommendation, and she was like, this is the most creative story I read in a really long time, or something like that. She gave the premise, and she said the premise was this girl who is cursed to be forgotten by everyone she meets walks into a bookstore and she meets this one guy who can actually remember her. And that is kind of what the premise is, but that part doesn't really happen until like 150 pages in. Like, it really takes a while to get to that point. I will say that the premise is really, really compelling. I think it's such a good idea for a book. It's super fascinating. There are so many ways it could have gone, and that's really what kept me reading, even when I felt like the book was pretty lackluster. So if you don't know what this book is about this girl named Addie LaRue. She's from this really small village in France. The year is 1714 when the book really kicks off, and she has to be married off, essentially, otherwise she's gonna live a life of like nothing. And Addie feels really constricted by all these restraints that women have to face at that time, and so she ends up fleeing from her wedding, and she makes a deal with a god who comes after dark, who's essentially a devil. She bargains her soul in exchange for freedom, because that's really what she wants, is freedom. But of course it's kind of like a monkey's paw situation where she gets her wish granted, but in a way that she didn't expect. This ultimate freedom that she's been granted is the fact that she can just never leave a mark anywhere. She can't write anything, she can't create anything, and when she interacts with people, they know her only for the time that they spend with her. The second that they leave the room, or they go to the bathroom, or she's out of sight, they instantly forget about her. She is cursed to be forgotten by everyone, and also by history in general, just because she has no ties anywhere. So that is the premise of this book, which I think is so fascinating and is the reason I picked it up. But ultimately this book was just not for me. It was not my taste at all. I gave it 2.5 stars on Goodreads. It's not a bad book by any means, it's just very much not my taste and my style. I had some pretty big problems with it. Primarily the fact that I feel like this book is just boring. I feel like nothing happens in it. The first 150 pages are really interesting and compelling because you're so new to the world, you're new to the circumstances, you're figuring things out. But once you figure out what the rules of the curse actually entail, the story just becomes this cycle of the same plot pattern over and over again. And I use the word plot pretty liberally at this point because I feel like not that much happens in the book. If you're reading a chapter from like a period in the past, either two things happen. She meets an artist and she spends a romantic day with them, and she influences their artwork and becomes their muse. Or she's in a pickle, or she's having a bad time, and the devil revisits her and is like, hey Adeline, like, is it time for you to give up your soul yet? Have you given up? She's like, no, I'm not giving up yet. That's it. I feel like I've spoiled at least 60 or 70% of the book by telling you those two things, because that's really what the middle chunk of this book is. Of course, there is this later storyline in which she meets this guy at this bookshop, and he's the only person she's ever met who can actually remember her after she's left the room. And so she's trying to figure out how that is, what kind of loophole this is. And that part is like moderately interesting. I think the first 100 pages of this book are interesting, and so are the last 100 pages, but everything in the middle could have been condensed, or it could have had some amount of variation. Instead, I felt like I was reading the same thing over and over again, just in a different setting and a different decade. I feel like there's an alternate version of this story that I would have enjoyed a lot more had the historical period parts of it been a little bit more thoroughly researched, but I don't think that that was like the story that Victoria Schwab is trying to tell. She's trying to tell like this loose, fantastical kind of story, but I feel like I would have enjoyed it a lot more had there been more research and had there been more of like a historical foundation there. And this is coming from someone who doesn't even really like history, but I just think that it would have been more interesting that way had Addie LaRue been there for these very cool events and had a role to play, and had there been more significance in the fact that she has lived for the past 300 years and seen the world change that way. And I feel like that part was really not explored. There are some heavy name drops where it's like Beethoven, Shakespeare, she sees Frank Sinatra sing, she sees Voltaire in a salon. There are these heavy name drops that are just vaguely placed there to make you feel like, yeah, she has lived at the same time as these important figures, but they're never elaborated upon and they're never used for anything. You know, I felt like they served no real purpose in the story other than to remind you that she's interacted or she's been in the same room as these cool figures because she's lived through history. But it's like I felt like I wanted something more with those things and I wasn't given that. Really, most of it was like, I meet an artist, I'm gonna take them on a picnic, and they're gonna make art based off of me even if they don't remember me. And that's just simply not the story that I was wanting. And I feel like maybe I would have liked the middle chunk more had I just enjoyed the writing more, but the writing style was really, really not my taste. I feel like my main impression of it was that Victoria Schwab really likes her own writing style. Like, she just loves to overwrite all of her really good ideas, because she does have great ideas, but they're just so acutely overwritten to the point where it kind of detracts from the story itself. It's just so flowery, so purple prosy, so repetitive. She'll repeat the same thing in different phrases because she couldn't choose which phrase sounded best. She's like, wow, I really like all the ways I said this. I guess I'll just keep them all in. You don't need to. You don't need to. The editor really should have trimmed this book down because there were so many overstated things that really could have been more impactful had they been more precise. And I feel like there are these two camps. Of course there are more, but you could boil down writing style into two camps where it's like you have someone who's precise and you have someone who's like elaborate and flowery and elegant. And V. Schwab really falls into that second camp, whereas if I were to choose, I would always choose the precision one, just because I feel like that requires a lot more skill, and I think that requires a lot more fine-tuning of your writing craft, in my opinion. I just want to emphasize that that doesn't mean that I think Victoria Schwab's a poor writer, because she's obviously not. I just think that her writing style is so far from what I personally like. Honestly, if you love flowery writing like that, you could read this book and it honestly might be your next favorite read. That's totally fair. It just wasn't really the book that I wanted to read. I do want to briefly touch on this idea of how white this book is, which Cindy has talked about at length in her video about this book, which I'm honestly impressed with myself that I watched, because at this point in my life I watch maybe one booktube video a month, and that was this month's selection for me. But it's a really insightful video, as all of her videos are, and I feel like I did have a similar experience in the fact that at first I was really annoyed by just how white the characters were. Everyone she was interacting with was white. All the languages that she knew were European based, and I was like, you do realize that there are other countries in the world, right? There are other cultures in the world. You've walked this earth for 300 years and you've never really thought to engage with any continent outside of Europe and the United States? Girl, you're missing out. Like a lot, you know? But I do think that this would have been such a different book, and maybe a book that Victoria Schwab wouldn't have been able to write had she made Addie a woman of color. You know, imagine living through 300 years of trauma as a woman of color. That's just like not the story she's trying to write here. I can understand why Victoria Schwab didn't go down that path. But that being said, once you're in New York and once you're in like semi-modern times, I do expect you to have more diverse characters. I think there was like a very intentional representation of queerness in a lot of our main characters, but there's more diversity than just your sexual identity. I would have loved to see more characters of color. I think maybe we have like one in this entire book of like at least 500 different side characters, you know? So that was disappointing, but to a moderate level, understandable. Up until a certain time period, understandable. I'm trying to see if there's anything else I'd want to say. In essence, this video is me saying that this book is not bad, it's just not the book for me. I didn't enjoy it the way that I wanted to, both because the plot didn't go where I wanted it to, and the writing style was really not my taste. And the characters themselves, like their struggles and their problems, just felt not issues enough for me to be really sympathetic to them. So yeah, that is a bummer that I read a book that I didn't enjoy very much. And I did see a tweet today that was like, we should normalize DNFing books that you know that you're not enjoying. And honestly, I should have DNF'd this book because I really was not enjoying myself in the big middle chunk. And it's a thick book, you know? But I do have this problem with like the idea of sunk cost. And once I have sunk cost, I feel like I can't give it up. I feel like I have to keep investing, which is economically not the right move. I know that, but I end up doing it anyway. Hopefully the next book I read, you know, in the next 6, 7, 8 months, because I know it's gonna take me that long to finish my next book. Hopefully I enjoy that one a lot more. If you read this book, honestly, I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you didn't have a bad time, because having a bad time reading is really not fun. If you love this book, or if you despise this book, or if you felt anywhere in between, honestly, I would just love to hear your thoughts, because it is a really interesting read, and the premise I thought was really fascinating. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll have a fantastic day, and happy reading. Bye!